Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and get started on the webinar. Today, the title is Simple Steps for Bigger Catches. We've got Dr. Aaron Sumrall here to give us the presentation. So, Aaron, you've got all of our attention.
Thank you, Tony. I appreciate it. Thank all of y'all for joining us this afternoon for the webinar. It's always a very humbling honor to be able to do this, and you take the time out of your day to listen to what we have to say on these webinars. So today, like Tony said, we're going to talk about some of the simple steps there to be able to catch some of those bigger sounders of pigs and more consistency, I suppose. And some of the things, though, you may wonder is, okay, why do we have to go back to some of the fundamentals? And whenever I start to go to a new property, and one of the beautiful benefits that I have for working with Pig Brig is that many times whenever I'm on a property, it's for the first time. So I literally have to step into my bag of fundamentals and start that project as if I have very green skills, very basic skills, and start from the fundamentals from the ground up, and putting in a management program or a focus on a given property where I have absolutely no experience or understanding. So whenever we go into a new property or into a new situation, or maybe you're new to trapping, some of those first few steps that we take are very, very critical in the overall success of that trapping effort and what you want to achieve in that. And so first things first is what we're going to come to is the trap site. So we start talking about the trap site, there's several things that need to be major in your decision making protocol there to get those right, to make sure the rest of those decisions fall into place a little bit more easily or a little bit more obvious as you go on into your protocol. So first things first that we want to see is the access to the location. So you want to make sure that you have easy access to that location. And when we're talking about easy access, it may not be a paved road or a gravel road or something of that nature to get there, but can you make it in there in an ATV or a UTV, a tractor, a truck, or something like that? And basically pretty much any condition, because many times, as we know, that whenever you start into a management protocol with pigs, the weather can change. It could get pretty nasty out there, whether that's a spring storm with a lot of rain, or it's a winter storm that's got a lot of ice and snow and so forth. So we want to make sure we can access that location, and in that that access to that location, it's going to be a consideration of time of year, what your vehicle is going to be. So whenever you're thinking about accessing that location, it's going to be, can you access that location in the at least one of your modes of transportation, whether that be your truck or your ATV. Whenever I look at accessing a location, I would prefer to be able to reach it with my truck. But overall, if I cannot access that location with an ATV, it is not used. Because yeah, when my primary mode of transportation to and from that trap site is my vehicle, if weather conditions change and I can't use my truck, I still have to access that location, and that would be with an ATV. So make sure you access that location, or can access that location pretty much any time of the year. And then also too, making sure that that location is well drained. So whenever you think about trap locations, yeah, we like to trap pigs in areas that typically are or have got a water source somewhat nearby, so forth and so on. But the one thing that when we're talking about a well drained area is that whenever you position your trap, what I like to do is I don't put my traps on flat level ground. One of the beautiful benefits of the Pig Brig Trap System is that we can put that trap on a slope without having to compromise the efficiency or the effectiveness of that trap. So whenever I'm looking for a well-drained area, I may have a slight slope where any water that falls doesn't pool up, doesn't turn into a mud hole. So if you've got that capability of putting something on a slope, then definitely do so. If you're in the flatter ground that's closer to the coasts, there are a few high rises in there in that topography. And some of those places, if you're closer to the coast, think about some of the vegetation that doesn't like to grow in with wet feet. So basically, if you're along the coast and you see yaupon, that will give you an idea that that's probably the last part of the surface of the ground to flood during a high rainfall event. That might be the area that you need to think about for a location that would be well drained or what better drained in the time of extreme moisture. So moving on to the next thing is there's using tree cover or shade. In the South, and the pigs don't get along very well with direct sunlight, especially in the summertime. So one of the things that we do know is that in prolonged exposure, doesn't matter if it's a domestic pig or a wild pig, but pigs will succumb to direct exposure to the sun, even in temperatures as low as in the 80s. So we try to use tree cover or shade because that overlong that prolonged exposure can cause those pigs to succumb to that exposure. And then at that point, in my experience, there's been some type of a pheromone that's released that you will not get any pigs visiting that location again. You'll have to move your trap set. So what I like to do is like what Tony DiNicola is doing there in that picture. If you'll notice, just with the shade pattern in the background and with the dew on the grass, that Tony's there at that trap site in the morning. So if you look, there's a tree line behind him that's casting that shadow. So that tells me he is on the west side of that tree line. And that's what I like to see because we definitely want to access the trap early in the morning. And if I have the opportunity, position the trap on the west side of the tree line. That way, as if I, for whatever reason, can't be there at daylight, that tree line gives me a prolonged shade cover that I can get to those pigs as soon as possible, and using that shade to work with for me. So think about your tree cover and your shade lines. This could be an agriculture field along the fence line. It doesn't take a lot of shade, but at least it'll help you up. The next thing is to set up close to travel corridors, not in travel corridors. So for those of us that like deer hunt, especially bow hunters, we don't set up a blind or a stand or anything like that directly in the path of travel. We're off to the edge and so forth. Same situation for pigs. Do not set up a big trap like the pig brig in the direct path of travel because it's going to be a cause for concern for those pigs. They may start to avoid that area. So what we do is we set those traps up some distance from that travel corridor, and it may only be 25, 30, 50 yards from that travel corridor, but just not right on top of it. Now, which side of the travel corridor that we set up on, sometimes it doesn't really matter. There's just enough pigs there and they're going to move. But if I am new to a property, what I'm going to try to do is think about which direction the prevailing winds are going to come from, and I set the trap up so as that the prevailing winds will push the smell of the bait over that travel corridor. So if I'm expecting a north wind, then I'm going to position my trap on the north side of that travel corridor. That way, that north wind will blow the smell of that bait to that travel corridor and cause those pigs to turn and come toward that trap. So definitely don't set up into travel corridors and such like that. But close to them is definitely a good thought. Now, trap setup. For 90% of the trap setups out there with the Pig Brig Trap System, a 6.5 foot post will be sufficient. So 6.5 foot of post there with a 5 foot of that post is above ground. The only exceptions that we typically see in here to that 6.5 foot post length is a 7 foot post only when you're in deep sugar sand, or you may be trapping along a creek bottom, where in that creek bottom you've got a lot of silt, a lot of organic matter, and the ground is just not very tightly packed because of that organic matter being relatively deep. Some other places that I've seen it in, just in very rare occasions, it may need a 7 foot post, is in areas where they cultivate rice, where that soil profile has been turned over exceptionally deep with a turning plow, and you have to have a little bit longer post to get down to more of a foundational type soil to provide some rigidity with that post. So get your post there, get the right length according to your soil profile, but 90% of you, 6.5 foot post is going to be plenty sufficient. So next thing, positioning the trap system the correct way is to where the base net of the trap is on the outside, the bore shield is on the inside. The only thing that I ever do to make sure that I've positioned the trap correctly is I read the warning sign. If I can read the warning sign from the outside of the T-post, if I'm standing on what would be the outside of the trap, if I can read the warning sign correctly, then that trap is oriented in the correct fashion. That's going to leave you with your trap, your bore shield inside, base net to the outside. And then the last thing I'll do is once all the trap is positioned in place and so forth and so on, before I tighten up my double hook cam straps, I'm going to test those ground anchors, those cabled ground anchors, to make sure that they're ready to go. And the way that I do that is I'll take my drive rod and run it through the eye of that cabled ground anchor, and I'll just pull it really stiffly to make sure that those ground anchors are attached sufficiently. Conditioning mode, in my mind, for me, is bar none the most critical mode, critical phase of the entire trapping process. Correct conditioning can make some unbelievably good catches, high numbers, removing a lot of pigs in a very short order. Improper conditioning can result in you educating pigs, shorter or smaller catches, and frustrated trappers. Okay, so conditioning mode for me is by far the most critical. We do hear from time to time people say, well, I caught 3 pigs and I never conditioned with the first grain of corn. That's great if that was only 3 pigs that were visiting that site. But what if there's a sounder of 30 and only 3 went into that trap? Is so now what is the possibility of condition or of educating those other 27 pigs? So just by no conditioning and catching a handful 90% of the time, 95% of the time, is not such a great thing, a positive thing. So what I do whenever I start my conditioning process is, once my trap is already in position, I put my trap up all at one time. I don't dry post and come back and hang the net later, and then come back on a third trip and start to condition that trap. I have to get things done. So I set up the trap, put it into conditioning mode, and start to condition all in the same visit. So by what I do to start that conditioning process is, after all the traps in place, about 90% of my bait is going to be on the outside of the trap, with the remaining bait on the inside. And I know that with all that activity and noise in that trap site and so forth, there's going to be some level of awareness of those pigs to that trap site. So that's the reason for 90% of the bait on the outside of the trap. I want to introduce those pigs to that trap rather than try to force them to go into the trap. So whenever I start off with that percentage outside and a smaller percentage inside, the next time I come to the trap to condition that trap, if those pigs have shown me that they have if entered that trap to feed on that 10% of the bait, then they are ready to go ahead and to be conditioned on the inside of the trap exclusively. If I get to that trap site and I see that those pigs have still not eaten any of the bait on the inside of the trap, I'll continue to condition with the majority of the bait on the outside of the trap, not forcing the pigs to go into that trap. So if we get to the point where we're trying to force pigs to do what we want them to do, they're probably going to leave you. They're probably going to cause some concerns and some frustrations and so forth. So we have to let the pigs dictate the length of the process and how we go about that. So start out with most of the bait on the outside, move it to the inside as the pigs show that they're willing and ready to go to the inside of that trap. And then so the next thing is that whenever we position that net, I like to position that net depending on what the landowner has told me. If the landowner is seeing pigs in the daytime, and they're just not really trying to leave at lightning speed whenever they're seen, then it tells me that those pigs are probably not a very high level of awareness or concern. So in that situation, I'm only going to lift my trap up in a couple of different places, where if I've got openings lifted on my pig brig, um, 180 degrees from one another, that's going to give me 2 high spots in the trap for those pigs to enter, but then that's going to give me 2 low spots. So that way, as those pigs are feeding in and around that trap, they'll get accustomed to feeling that net rub their back, and so forth and so on, and then and making that conditioning a little bit easier for me to go about. The next thing I'd ask of that landowner is if that landowner only sees pigs in the middle of the night on a game camera, and they're always walking with their heads completely erect, and they're not in a calm posture, then that tells me those pigs are educated. That tells me those pigs have been either ran with dogs or shot at or whatever. So in that situation, I may lift that pig brig trap at 3 or 4 connection points, which lifts the entire net above the ground. And with that entire net above the ground, then they can see through it. There's no visual obstructions, and it takes away some of that cause for concern. Last thing to think about too is whenever I condition my traps, I leave the firearm at the house. I don't even want the possibility of thinking, oh man, I need to go ahead and shoot one of these pigs. Is shooting pigs around the conditioning trap will almost instantaneously educate those pigs to that trap that it's a bad thing. So whenever we're conditioning pigs to a trap, never, ever, ever shoot pigs around that conditioning trap. Never run dogs, or never let anybody in the area know that you're conditioning pigs, or they may run the dogs for you. So we don't ever want to snare pigs around traps. That we don't want anything to associate that trap with danger for those pigs. If anything ever comes in the mind of a pig as far as danger, and they can associate it with that trap, they're gone. So don't do that. And if you do your evening run around your property, or your evening ride with your buggy around your property, and Fido wants to go with you, make sure Fido stays on the buggy while you're going around the property, and he's not going out there and marking your trap for you. Dog urine will quickly cause a pig to avoid an area, and cause more concerns, more frustrations, and so forth. Now we get into the fun part, the capture mode. We've conditioned correctly; those pigs are ready to go. We've got 100% or so of the, or close to 100% of those pigs entering and exiting that trap to freely feed. Whenever we go in there to go from conditioning mode to capture mode, that's what we look at. Are the pigs comfortably feeding under the net, and do we have 100% of that sounder? The only time that I go in and prematurely go from conditioning to capture mode is if a bear happens to show up. So if I've got 60 to 80% of the sounder conditioning to that trap, and I get the first sign of a bear show up, I immediately go to capture mode. The reason for that is I would rather catch 60 to 80% of those pigs than lose them all, because once bears start showing up, pigs won't show up anymore. So they're going to completely leave the area. So even if I catch 60 to 80% of that sounder, I know that they're going to leave the area anyway. Well, by the time they come back to the area after those bears have left the area alone, then they're going to be ready to be caught again. And now I have fewer to worry about catching. So capture mode is going to depend on, one is, do I have 100% going on? Two, do I have a bear showing up? And then number three is, like, if I have a major weather system blowing in, like a hurricane or a major cold front that's going to drop that barometric pressure, I may go ahead and go to capture mode to catch what I can before that weather event completely shuts me out with a zero. So a couple of things to keep in mind whenever you're going in from conditioning to capture mode. Check your whole trap setup again, just to make sure everything is tight, everything is in place, and first and foremost is to make sure that those double hook cam straps are securely attached. So check those straps at the top of the post, and the way that your top line on your pig brig is attached to those double hook cam straps. Make sure that all of the bait is on the inside of the trap. Whenever we correctly position the bait on the inside of a pig brig trap system, it's going to be no bait within 2 feet of the side of that skirt. So if you look at the picture there on the screen, look at the edge of the skirt where it lays into the floor of the trap. We do not want any bait within 2 feet of that skirt line. And the reason for that is pigs are entering that trap. We want them committed to the bait before they get to the bait. We don't want any bait inside the skirting itself or any closer to the skirting than 2 feet, because as those pigs are feeding on bait that's in those positions, something may scare them and they may back out. So we want to make sure those pigs are committed to that bait whenever they enter that trap. And by positioning that bait further toward the center of that trap, that's going to make sure that they are committed when they're coming in. So also too, any of you that have muddy ground, because as pigs condition to a trap, there are going to be a lot of visitation there, and especially if that ground is already wet, it can turn it into some muddy situations there. So most of us out there are going to have more of that soupy type, watery mud and so forth. It's never a concern to for us. And the other is going to be that those of you that have mud on the ground that's more tacky, more clay-based mud, that can cause you a little bit of an adhesion concern there. So if you got that adhesive mud that's a high clay content, then what we want to do is if you can put down a bed or a layer of pine straw or rice straw, wheat straw, something of that nature, to be able to give you that buffer between that adhesive mud and the skirt system, the skirt part of the system. The exceptions to this, though, are if you don't have mud. Think about those neighbors of ours to the north in Canada. I know a bunch of the buddies up there that I've got that are trapping. Their concern is during the spring and during the fall, whenever those transitional temperatures from daylight to dark go above and below freezing. So what we've seen is that in the daytime, if it's above freezing, they'll get a thin film of water between the skirt material and the ground, and then at night, whenever it goes well below freezing, that thin film of water will freeze to the ground, freeze that skirting to the ground, causing concern that's there. And so it's same situation. If you're in those transitional temperature barriers or ranges, and there's that chance of freezing the net to the ground, then put you that same layer of straw on the ground, and that'll take away your concerns of adhesion. Okay, post capture. Whenever we get to the trap, post capture is a very critical part. And the first thing for me in post capture is safety of you, of anyone else that may be attending the trap with you. And then also, too, with post capture, I'm thinking about the ethical dispatch of those pigs. So, first things first is whenever I come to a trap at post capture, I want to stay calm whenever I approach the trap. I never drive to my traps. Okay, so whenever I park a couple of 100 yards away from the trap and I walk to the trap, and I am not being stealthy about walking to the trap, I'm just going to casually walk to that trap. Couple of things I'm looking for. First and foremost, as I'm walking to the trap, I want to look to make sure from a distance at visual assessment, is that Pig Brig Trap System still intact? Did everything still hold up the way it is? Because I don't want to walk up to that trap and have 30 pigs in there and find out that we've got a problem, and now safety is a concern. The second thing I want to look at as I'm walking to that trap is, are there any pigs that did not get into the trap? Maybe you had adhesive mud, and that adhesive mud stuck that net to the ground where those other pigs didn't go in, or you had so many pigs in the trap that they were standing on the skirt and it didn't allow additional pigs to come into that trap. Any of those pigs that are left on the outside of the trap, if I've only got one or two, I may try to shoot them. Okay. If I've got 10 or 12 or 15, I'm not going to shoot them. I'm just going to dispatch the pigs in the trap, reset the trap, and try to catch the 15 that were outside the trap. But if I've got one or two and I think I can get it taken care of with a firearm, I'm going to do that. Second thing I'm going to do is I never use anything other than a 22 long rifle, but with the very, very a rare occasion of just a 22 Magnum. I never, ever, ever use hollow points. Hollow points will cause too much fragmentation and not get the penetration that you need. So whenever I approach the trap, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stand within a foot or so of a T-post. I never brace on the post. I never brace on the net, because as those pigs are hitting the net, it's going to change your point of aim, causing some bad shots. So I'll stand close enough to the post so that way if I do have an aggressive pig rush me, then that net, that rushing, that expanding net can be stopped by that post in place where that pig can't get to me even from inside the net. So what I'm going to do is I'll stand within a foot of the trap, or a foot of the T-post rather, and I'll position my feet where I can cover the entire expanse of that trap without having to move anything other than my arms. And at that point, I just stand there quietly and patiently until the first pig gives me the shot that I'm looking for. And that doesn't, I don't care what size pig it is. The first pig that looks at me is the one that I'm going to use for my initial dispatch. And so I know that many's going to say, well, shoot them in the ear, behind the ear is completely ethical, and it absolutely is. But even with a 22 Magnum, 22 long rifle, if you shoot one in the ear, behind the ear, then those bones between the ears inside the head of that animal are super thin. So it's very common that even shooting a pig in the ear will get an exit wound. And I'm trying to avoid that exit wound for two reasons primarily. Number one is a safety concern. If I get an exit wound on that pig with any projectile, even if you're using a bigger caliber, it may hit a T-post on the other side. And now what's the possibilities of a ricochet? Okay. The second thing is with no exit wound, I only have one wound that would be pouring blood into that trap site. So I'm trying to minimize bloodlet with the secondary reason for that. So my point of aim is gonna be with a pig looking at me. I'm gonna have a line drawn from one ear to the opposite eye, and so forth and so on with the other side, which makes an X on the forehead of that pig above the plane of the eyes. So literally right in the center of the head, and that's going to be where the brain case is. If you go down below the plane of the eyes, you're going to get into that nasal cavity, and whenever you shoot one in that nasal cavity, they're going to bleed like the proverbial stuck pig. Okay, so it's going to be a pretty nasty situation. All right, so know your point of aim, and then what I do is I wait for that first pig to give me the shot that I'm looking for, and then dispatch that pig. Once that animal goes calm, goes limp, the rest of the pigs in that trap will see that as a calm animal, and they'll come to it. And then when they come to that calm looking animal, a calm appearing animal, then they'll start looking up as well. So it makes the dispatch process much more ethical with an animal that is standing still to give you the shot that you need and what you're looking for. If you have plans to load out your pigs, for those of you that live in Texas, Oklahoma, and Florida, have some laws in place that do allow for legal transport of live pigs, then think about how that seam on your Pig Brig Trap System needs to be positioned when you set the trap up so that you can pull that seam open to load those pigs out. If you don't think about that during the trap setup process, then you may not be able to load out of that trap. So that thought's going to have to be, or that decision is going to have to be made before you set your trap up. So some additional tips. Additional tips is one of the things about catching pigs in the pig brig is we have a continual catch. We can catch, and we have libraries of video that show that we catch multiple sounders in one night or extremely large sounders in a single catch event. And the key to that is going to be making sure that there's plenty of bait. And you say, okay, well, you got on the screen there 4 to 5 pounds of bait per pig. Man, that's a heck of a lot of bait. Well, first off, I don't use that 4 to 5 pounds whenever I'm conditioning. I only use that whenever I'm ready to catch. I want to keep those pigs coming into that trap. I want there to be an incentive for them to come in that trap. And then secondly, if there's enough bait in that trap, once they're captured, there's less desire of that pig to try to escape that trap. So I want 4 to 5 pounds of bait in there. One, obviously, to be beneficial to catching a lot of pigs. But the second reason that there's that much bait allowed per pig is during that conditioning process, how many raccoons did you have coming to that trap? How many deer did you have coming to that trap? So even whenever you go into that catch mode, then you still may have a lot of raccoons going toward that trap. You may have deer that are jumping the side or giving you aggravations there. We have other non-targets that could be causing you some concerns. Like if you have migratory crows coming through an area, they need a lot of bait. Blackbirds is the same way. So we got to allow for those non-target species in that pounds per pig allotment. We need to arrive at that trap at as early as possible, daybreak being the latest. We'll see pigs that once they fed on that 4 to 5 pounds of bait per pig at night, many times they'll just lay down and sleep it off for the rest of the night until the sun starts to rise and they're ready to go back to those thickets to spend the rest of the day. So we need to get to that trap early. And daybreak is going to be pretty much at the last of what we recommend timing for you to be there. Don't leave your trap in the field all year round. If you do that, a couple of things is going to be a concern. One, and is going to be all the vines and things that grow up into that pig brig system that you're going to have to clean out the next time, and that's a frustration. Others I've seen leave the trap in the field, and they'll leave it with part of the net on the ground, and by the time they get back, there's already mud that's built up, there's dirt that's pulled up on top of it, and so forth, and it's caused some troubles. Other things that you need to think about with regard to not leaving your trap in the field is that at certain times of the year, primarily spring and fall, what we have seen in certain places around the country is that squirrels will come to that trap and start to chew holes in that trap to use the removed material to freshen up their nests. So if you're not going to be using the trap over a 6 week period or so, take that trap down and put it in a heavier tote storage device, and get that stored back at home. The storage component that you use, or the storage tool that you use, is what I use, as a heavy tote that you can get at any lumber yard or even Walmart, anything like that, where the rodents, the rats, and the mice can't get in it at home. So other things to be mindful of are the weather conditions. Like we have the fall of the year coming down the line now too. So weather conditions that change barometric pressure, or weather conditions that change um, um, uh, like heavy rainfalls, big ice storms, snowstorms, things like that. Especially rainfalls in the sense that where you'd have flowing water that maybe where your trap system is at, go take that trap system down. I mean, we're in Texas where I'm at, and in much of the South, we're still in the heart of hurricane season. So don't let a hurricane sneak up on you, which there should not be a hurricane sneaking up on any of us. If you see some predicted storm pattern coming at you that's going to be very detrimental to just the trapping effort in general, go ahead and take that pig brig trap system down and out of the field. And don't forget your cameras. So there's nothing that's going to damage electronics more than high water. So get those cameras out of the fields as well. And don't forget, we've got you back. So any kind of questions, concerns, anything like that that comes up, definitely give us a call, text, email us. We're on the clock. We're on the phone. We're going to be the ones talking to you, so we know what you're facing. We know how to work the system and give the advice that you need. So a couple of things in mind that come up. First and foremost is that we do. Many of you, just from looking at the Facebook owners page, uh, definitely believe in the Tacticam camera system. And now Pig Brig does offer that as a camera here within Pig Brig. So you have the options now here are your Spartan cameras or your Tacticam camera system. So keep that in mind as you're planning your next um, uh, pig trapping excursion. If you need another camera, give us a call. We can get you set up. What you see on the screen there is upcoming webinars, and the one in November is still, we're looking at a couple of different options. So the one in November, if you've got some things that you would like to see that we haven't done or that you need more information on, definitely reach out to us. Let us know what you would like to see or what you would like to cover. And we very well could use November the 20th as just a question and answer session, where if there's some things that keep popping up or something that you're newly exposed to that we need to cover, we'll just leave that open to you bringing the questions, and we'll fill those during that November 20 event. So with that, I'm going to turn things back over to you, Tony. And again, too, folks, for all of y'all that joined us this afternoon, it is a much appreciated that you take time out of your busy day and your evening to spend it with us. And we hope that these webinars are proving beneficial for you. Tony?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that presentation, Aaron. So like Aaron was saying, keep an eye on your email. We're going to be sending out this recording of this webinar, and we're also going to be sending out all of those upcoming webinars as they become available or as registration comes available. So keep an eye there. But I just wanted to say thank you, Aaron, for your presentation, and thank you everyone for attending today. Hope to see y'all on the next webinar.